Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to welcome you all today. Today, we will be exploring the topic of industrial dispute. This presentation is brought to you by Roy's Pathfinder. We'll start with an overview of what industrial disputes are, and then move on to their causes, effects, and possible solutions. So let's get started. An industrial dispute is essentially a real and substantial disagreement. It can occur between employers and employees, or even between different groups of employees themselves. The core issue revolves around employment, non-employment, terms of employment, or labor conditions. According to Section 2(k) of the Industrial Disputes Act of 1947, these disputes typically involve collective grievances, meaning they affect groups rather than just individuals. The main issues at the heart of these disputes usually include wages, working hours, and job security. Recognizing these disputes is crucial because they influence the working environment and industrial harmony, which ties directly into the overall theme of maintaining good labor relations. Let's start by looking at wages and allowances. This is actually the most common cause of industrial disputes. It often happens because of inflation, which increases the cost of living, and the need for workers to get higher wages to keep up. When wages don't keep pace with inflation, it can lead to dissatisfaction and conflicts. Next, we have bonuses and incentives. These are meant to motivate employees and reward their hard work. However, disputes can arise when bonuses are not paid on time or if they fall short of what employees expect. This can create a sense of unfairness and frustration among workers. Lastly, personnel matters also frequently cause disputes. These involve issues like promotions, layoffs, retrenchment, or even wrongful dismissals and suspensions. When employees feel these decisions are unfair or mishandled, it can lead to disagreements and industrial unrest. So all these causes, wages and allowances, bonuses and incentives, personnel matters, are interconnected. They highlight how important fair treatment and clear communication are in maintaining harmony in the workplace. Addressing these issues proactively can help prevent conflicts and promote a more productive environment. Now, let's take a closer look at the causes of industrial disputes. One major factor is working conditions. Workers often demand better safety measures, shorter working hours, and improved facilities like canteens or rest areas. These issues directly impact employee well-being and morale. Another significant cause is management policies. Resistance to changes, especially those that could benefit workers, can create tension. For example, authoritarian management styles or refusal to recognize labor unions can lead to frustration and conflict. Lastly, indiscipline and violence also play a role. When discipline breaks down and violent actions occur, they escalate unrest within the workplace. All these factors are interconnected and contribute to the larger picture of industrial disputes, highlighting the importance of addressing these issues to maintain a harmonious work environment. Let's take a closer look at some of the main causes behind industrial disputes. One significant factor is inter-union rivalry. This happens when different labor unions compete for recognition or influence within a workplace or industry. Such conflicts can lead to tensions and disruptions, making it harder to maintain smooth industrial relations. Another major cause is political interference. Sometimes, political parties get involved in union activities, which can influence their actions and decisions. This often results in work stoppages or strikes, especially in countries like India, where political interests are deeply intertwined with labor movements. Understanding these causes helps us see how external influences and internal rivalries can impact industrial peace and productivity. Recognizing these factors is key to developing strategies that promote healthier labor relations overall. Let's talk about the impact of industrial disputes on employers. When disputes happen, one of the most immediate effects is reduced production. Stoppages in work lead to an instant drop in output and revenue, which can really affect the company's overall performance. Another key impact is financial loss. Not only do profits decrease during these times, but there's also a risk of damage to machinery if shutdown procedures aren't properly followed. Plus, unresolved disputes can sometimes lead to legal liabilities that add to the financial burden. Finally, there's the reputational damage. Persistent disputes can harm a company's brand image and weaken customer relationships. When customers see ongoing issues or labor unrest, it can undermine trust and loyalty. All of these impacts tie back to the overall theme of how industrial disputes can significantly affect a company's stability and success. Now, let's take a closer look at the impact of industrial disputes on employees. One of the most immediate effects is the loss of income. When workers go on strike, they are not earning wages during that period, which can really strain their financial stability. Another important point is job insecurity. Prolonged disputes can sometimes lead to layoffs or retrenchments, creating a sense of uncertainty about job stability among employees. And finally, we can't overlook the emotional toll. These conflicts often lead to tension in the workplace, which can significantly reduce employee morale and overall well-being. All of these factors highlight how disputes don't just affect the company, they deeply impact the individuals who work there. This ties back to our overall theme of understanding the broader consequences of industrial conflicts. Now, let's look at the broader impact of industrial disputes on our economy and society. One of the most immediate effects is a lowered national output. When productivity drops due to strikes or work stoppages, it directly reduces the overall income of the country, which can affect everyone. Another significant point is economic disruption. For example, strikes in key public utility sectors like power and transportation can seriously cripple daily life. Imagine disruptions in electricity, water, or transportation services. These can halt businesses, delay deliveries, and create chaos in everyday routines. Finally, we can't overlook the social tensions that can arise from industrial disputes. When conflicts escalate, they sometimes lead to violence or even political unrest. All these impacts highlight just how interconnected industrial disputes are with the well-being of our economy and society at large. Let's take a closer look at the historical development of industrial disputes in India. Initially, during the colonial era, there was a significant neglect of workers' rights and issues, which meant that disputes often went unresolved or were ignored altogether. As time progressed, especially after World War I, we saw a rise in labor unrest, reflecting workers' increasing demand for better conditions and fair treatment. This unrest pushed the government and industry to develop more structured legal frameworks to handle disputes. Key legislation played a crucial role here, starting with the Trade Disputes Act of 1929, which was one of the first efforts to regulate industrial conflicts. The focus was on establishing mechanisms for resolving disagreements. This trend continued and culminated in the Industrial Disputes Act of 1947, shortly after India gained independence. This act aimed to regulate industrial relations more comprehensively by introducing formal processes for conciliation and adjudication. Overall, these developments show how India's approach to industrial disputes evolved from neglect to a more systematic and legal framework, aligning with our broader theme of building a fair and stable industrial environment. So, during the early period before 1918, labor was largely unorganized, and there were very few laws to protect workers. The Factories Act of 1883, for example, mainly aimed to safeguard the interests of British employers rather than the workers themselves. It was a time when workers had little voice or rights. Moving into the post-World War I years, from 1919 to 1938, we see a different picture emerging. The economy faced significant hardships, prices were rising, wages were low, and this led to widespread unrest among the working class. In response, trade unions started forming more actively, giving workers a collective voice, and strikes became more common as a way to demand better conditions. Then, during the wartime period from 1939 to 1945, the government's approach shifted again. Under Rule 81A of the Defense of India rules, strikes were heavily restricted. The government introduced mandatory adjudication, which meant disputes had to go through official channels to prevent disruptions in production that could affect the war effort. This shows how the government prioritized national interests during wartime, often at the expense of workers' rights. These phases highlight how labor movements and government policies evolved in response to economic and political pressures, shaping the landscape of industrial relations in India. Now, let's take a look at the key historical phases and developments in the evolution of industrial relations. The first major milestone is the Industrial Disputes Act of 1947. This was a landmark law passed shortly after World War II, specifically on April 1st of that year. Its main purpose was to promote industrial peace, and it did so by establishing mechanisms like works committees, which facilitated dialogue between workers and management, as well as conciliation officers and labor tribunals to help resolve disputes effectively. Moving forward, after India gained independence, there were several amendments to this act over the years, particularly in 1976 and 1982. These amendments introduced stricter rules concerning layoffs and retrenchments. Essentially, they aimed to regulate how and when employers could reduce their workforce, making the process more transparent and protective of workers' rights. These phases highlight how legislation has evolved to balance industrial growth with worker protection, aligning with the overall theme of creating a fair and stable industrial environment. Thank you so much for your attention today. I really appreciate you taking the time to engage with this presentation. I hope the key points we've discussed have given you valuable insights and a clearer understanding of the overall topic. Remember, the ideas we explored are not just theoretical. They're meant to be applied and adapted to your specific situations. If you take away just one thing from today, I hope it's the importance of continuous learning and innovation. Again, thank you for being such an attentive audience. I look forward to seeing how you will implement these concepts moving forward.